What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. Blizzard recently granted me access to the early Overwatch 2 alpha to get to playtest the brand new hero Sojourn, as well as the reworks for Doomfist, Orisa, Bastion, and Sombra. So in today's video, I wanted to go ahead and share my post-gameplay thoughts of these new heroes, because overall I think Blizzard has done a phenomenal job with these 5 different characters, and there are some really great aspects in each and every one of them, which I absolutely want to highlight. So starting off with what is easily the most anticipated hero of this bunch, the brand new hero, Sojourn. And to start, I'm going to go ahead and give a very brief rundown of each and every one of her abilities. So first up, her primary fire is a rapid firing of projectiles, which has a fairly decent spread, thus making it somewhat difficult to hit your targets from range. Her alternate fire, of course, is the hit scan high damage railgun shot, which is charged up and does more damage based on how much energy you gain via use of her primary fire. Her first ability is power slide, which allows her to move very quickly along the ground in any given direction, and then either come to a natural stop or end the slide prematurely by jumping and getting some pretty significant air off of it. Her second ability is Disruptor Shot, which is a big AoE damage dealing ability that also slows any enemies trapped within it, and her ultimate is Overclock, which causes the energy on her weapon to automatically charge up over time without having to deal damage, and on top of that allows her railgun shots to penetrate enemy targets, thus letting it hit multiple enemies at once. So, having covered her kit and gotten to actually play her myself in-game, what do I think of Sojourn? Well, she's cool, she's fun, but she really just isn't my type of hero. Yeah, I kinda hate to say it, but as many of you know, I'm not really a DPS player. There's a few DPS heroes I enjoy here and there, but by and large, my preference are tanks and supports, so while I absolutely loved getting to play Sojourn and trying out her kit and abilities, it just wasn't one that really clicked with me. So personally, I don't expect myself to actually be playing a whole ton of Sojourn in the future, but I do still have some thoughts about her as a character and her role in the game, and especially what it's like to actually try playing against her. So for starters, I think it was Jeff Goodman in one of the various interviews or live streams Blizzard did recently when they were first showing off Sojourn's abilities, who mentioned that Sojourn is a bit of a feast or famine type character. And what he meant by that is that you're either going to get a ton of value out of being able to use her, or essentially throw by attempting to play her. And in my experience, that's very much how Sojourn actually feels in game. She's a lot like Widowmaker in that if you're really good at hitting your railgun shots and know how to position yourself well and deal damage to the enemy, then you're going to make the enemy team's lives miserable. But if you're an aim-adverse tank main who can't hit the very ground you're standing on, like myself, then you're probably going to make your own teammates' lives miserable. Certainly I experienced both sides of this in playing the alpha, in that either I was the one playing Sojourn and not really contributing much to my team, or maybe seeing some other unfortunate person on the other team who just really couldn't land their shots, or more often playing against some pro player or grandmaster who effortlessly clicked heads and just deleted me and my teammates. I think Sojourn's probably going to be a pretty controversial hero overall once more people actually get access to playing her, simply because of how much damage she can deal. And while I wouldn't personally say that she's overpowered by any stretch of the imagination, I do think she definitely fits into that category where a lot of people are going to get really frustrated playing against her when the people who are playing her are really good at landing those railgun shots. Aside from just being able to click heads though, one aspect of Sojourn which did really stick out to me is her mobility aspects, specifically the power slide ability. Power slide in a sense almost makes Sojourn feel like a hybrid of Tracer and Widowmaker, who ultimately ends up filling the same niche as Soldier 76. That is to say, she's a hero who typically wants to stay in the sort of mid-range area and definitely be controlling the high ground, but then whenever you try to deal with Sojourn by, say, diving her as Wrecking Ball or Winston, she has both the high-speed horizontal mobility of a Tracer Blink, as well as the vertical mobility of a Widowmaker Grapple, thus making her particularly frustrating to try to deal with, even when you're a big beefy gorilla, and it feels like you should be able to just jump on her and take her out, cause no, she can usually just power slide away, and then continue to cause problems for your team. I realize at this point that I probably probably sounds like I'm a bit frustrated with Sojourn, and I don't intend for it to come across that way. I think I just noticed more of the annoying aspects of Sojourn than the beneficial aspects, because, as I said, I personally am not someone who's probably going to get much utility out of Sojourn, simply because she isn't the type of hero I enjoy playing, and I'm just not that good at hitting targets in that way. But that being said, every aspect of her kit while playing as her feels really, really good. That power slide mechanic feels so much fun to use, especially with that jump popping up at the end, and just the power of firing her gun, and especially the railgun alternate fire, just feels really, really good. I know people are always joking about the fact that we had to wait pretty much 3 years since she was officially revealed as a hero just to finally start playing her or even get a good look at her abilities, but honestly, I think Blizzard made good use of that time at the very least. They've certainly polished her concept down to a really tightly knit and effective design, so I certainly commend them for having put together what honestly seems like a really solid hero. However, moving on from the brand new hero, next up, let's talk about the reworks, starting with the Orisa rework. Oh my goodness, this rework is crazy. Orisa's rework in Overwatch 2 makes her feel like an entirely different hero. The way she plays, the abilities at her disposal, and even her in-game personality, which I'm going to touch on a bit later on, all feel radically different from what she had previously. First up is her primary fire, which now no longer has finite ammo, but rather operates on an overheat mechanic, where the longer you fire it, the more heat you generate, and then if you reach that maximum heat level, you have to have a prolonged cooldown sequence before you can fire again. On top of that, the projectiles you fire deal less damage the farther they travel, thus making them much more effective at shooting targets close range. Her first ability, Energy Javelin, throws out an Energy Javelin which can hit targets, knocking them backwards, and deals additional damage to them if it knocks them into a wall. Her next ability, Javelin Spin, blocks incoming projectiles while moving Orisa at a faster speed forward, and will both deal damage and knock back any enemies she comes in contact with while using the ability. Her next ability, Fortify, is essentially the same as it is in Overwatch 1, with the main difference now being that in addition to granting her crowd control immunity, it also gives her a bit of temporary health and reduces the rate at which her primary fire weapon overheats. Then her ultimate, Terra Lance, is a large AoE effect where she spins her javelin to suck in enemies before piercing down to deal a ton of damage to them. Also, during the use of this ultimate, she automatically gains Fortify. So, having covered the basics, how do I feel about this kit? Well, as I already said, Orisa's rework is pretty phenomenal. It makes her feel like a completely different hero, and starting with her primary fire, I really like this new weapon. I was honestly surprised by just how much they changed it, since Orisa's standard fusion driver she has in Overwatch 1 always felt like part of her kit that, I don't know, just kind of worked fine and nobody ever really complained about. So while I certainly understand why Blizzard would rework Orisa as a hero overall, I was surprised to see them so radically change her just basic weapon. That being said, I don't have anything against it. It actually feels really satisfying to shoot, and good lord, that reload animation for when you overheat just looks, so cool. I absolutely love it. Although I will say that I kind of miss the fact that her gun in Overwatch 2 isn't as much of an LMG as it was in Overwatch 1. Personally, I've always been a big fan of LMG weapons in video games, so who knows, maybe we'll end up getting a new hero later down the line who gets a more proper LMG now that Orisa has somewhat moved away from that type of weapon, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to her Energy Javelin, this is perhaps my favorite aspect of the Orisa rework. I know a number of other people have already been referring to it as a ranged Doomfist punch, and honestly, yeah, that's essentially what it is, but it just feels so good to use this ability. There was one instance I recall in particular while playing on Toronto as Orisa, where I cancelled an enemy Roadhog ultimate by just chucking a spear point blank into his fat chest, and it just felt so satisfying being able to do that as Orisa. In general, it does seem like this ability is going to be very useful at cancelling enemy ultimates or other channeled abilities, and while the ranged Doomfist punch comparison I do think is a decent way of describing it, I think it's actually probably more akin to Sigma's accretion. It's basically just this big projectile you could lob out there to deal damage and stun an enemy. And also like Sigma's accretion, I will mention that this javelin is kind of hard to actually land shots with. Certainly it's easier to hit bigger targets like a Winston or a Roadhog, but you try hitting a Lucio while he's running around with speed boost, good luck, pal. The hitbox of the javelin itself feels kind of odd. I don't know if I just didn't really have ample time to get a good feel for the ability based on the limited amount of time I actually got to play in the alpha, or if the hitbox for it is just kind of strange, but overall it definitely is a skill shot, and one that's probably going to take a decent amount of practice if you want to be able to land on the enemy pretty consistently. Moving on to Javelin Spin, this ability is useful, but not quite as exciting as its thrown counterpart. I think my favorite part of this ability might in fact just be the fact that it gives Orisa a speed boost when she uses it, which is incredibly useful for getting around, especially since she doesn't have the protection of a barrier anymore, so it's certainly useful for her to be able to have that spin to just sort of quickly get in and out whenever need be. On top of that, the damage blocking aspect is certainly useful as well. It feels very similar to just D.Va's defense matrix, but it is nice that on top of that aspect, you can use it to just sort of plow your way through the enemy team. Her next ability though, Fortify, is essentially just Fortify. There really isn't anything new to say about it. It's the one aspect of her kit which essentially didn't change at all. It did change a little bit in that you get temporary health while using it now, and it also has the reduction in overheat for her primary fire, but most of the time you're probably still going to be using it for the same reasons you used Fortify in Overwatch 1, so I don't think there's much to say about it. The final ability of her new kit though, the Terra Lance ultimate, is unfortunately I think my least favorite part of her rework. I don't know, the ultimate overall just feels kind of clunky and not terribly effective whenever you try to use it. It's essentially like a self-centered graviton surge that also deals a ton of damage to the enemies trapped in it at the end, but the fact that you're completely immobilized while using it, and it's also just centered around yourself, means that you as Orisa have to make yourself pretty vulnerable in order to try to actually get any utility off of it. Not only is it easy for targets who didn't get trapped in your surge to just sort of gun you down while you're trying to use it, but also in order to actually trap any enemies at all, you pretty much have to just run into the enemy team, which more often than not feels like it's just a dead giveaway for what you're going to end up doing. I feel like as time goes on and more people get used to playing as and against this new Orisa, it's going to become really obvious whenever an Orisa is about to try ulting, so I'm a bit concerned about that aspect of it. Overall, I don't really have an issue with the ultimate, I wouldn't say. It perhaps feels a little underwhelming as an ultimate, and again, doesn't feel like it actually gets that much utility in many situations, but it's okay. Not a bad part of her kit, I wouldn't say, but probably the weakest in my opinion. Now, one other aspect of this rework for Orisa, which I would like to touch on, is the radical change to her personality. Yes, if you haven't heard from other creators or seen in other videos yet at this point, basically every single hero in the game, as far as I could tell, got a whole host of new voice lines. I'm talking standard interactions when shooting, getting shot at, performing abilities, casual banter in the spawn room before the match starts. There are a ton of new voice lines for every single hero. And Orisa's new voice lines specifically have definitely shifted her into a much more aggressive, confident, and domineering type character, as opposed to the timid, inexperienced, almost childlike character she used to be back in Overwatch 1. For reference, I'll just play some of the new voice lines she has, so you can get a good feel for what her new character and personality actually feels like.
Not on my watch.
Triple kill.
I will strike you all down. Meet your fate.
Double kill.
You did not scare me.
Double kill.
So yeah, it's interesting to see that Blizzard has taken this step with the character, as personally I was not expecting them to actually progress and develop a hero like this, but I guess it fits with her gaining this new set of abilities, and from a story perspective is a pretty cool thing to add in as well. There's not much more to really say about it, I guess, at this point. Maybe we'll see some further developments for either Orisa or other heroes as well as time goes on, but this was just a neat little thing to see that Blizzard decided to focus on, and I'm glad they did it. Overall, when it comes to Orisa's reworked kit, I'm actually pretty impressed with just how tightly knit and well put together all the different abilities and even just the theming of the rework itself seems to fit together. This doesn't feel like some sort of clunky, desperate rework the devs went for when they realized that, oh, Orisa's not working, we gotta change her so she works better. This feels like a very concentrated, focused idea that has been really well fleshed out, not only in the character's kit and abilities and how effective they are at working together, but also the animations and visual effects of all of it. It feels really well done. Compared to the other 3 major hero reworks we got in this first Overwatch 2 beta, Orisa's by far stands out as being the most significant, in that it effectively just feels like she's a brand new hero. And speaking of the other reworked heroes, let's move on to the next notable rework, being for Doomfist. Yes, as we are all well aware at this point, Doomfist has been reworked into a tank hero, and yet somehow, despite changing categories, underwent a less radical change than Orisa did. So for him, really the changes that are worth highlighting are the fact that his Seismic Slam has now become almost a hybrid of both the previous Seismic Slam as well as his Rising Uppercut, although in actuality with how this ability works, it's almost more of a Winston leap of sorts. And the brand new ability he ended up getting, Power Block, allows him to once again fill that same sort of defensive role with a sort of defense matrix, but not really defense matrix type ability. I'm starting to notice a trend here with moving away from barriers and moving towards defense matrix clones, but I'll probably talk about that more in a separate video later on. And this Power Block, of course, allows him to charge up his Rocket Punch to deal more damage and even knock enemies into each other, which is perhaps my favorite aspect of his new kit. Additionally, one little change to his ultimate as well is that it now slows targets it hits instead of dealing as much damage as it used to, and Rocket Punch and his primary fire also deal less damage as well, but otherwise are effectively the same. So overall, I have to say, I am in love with Tank Doomfist. Somehow he feels more fluid as a tank than he did as a damage hero. And I think more than anything that has to do with his Seismic Slam and the fact that it's now a hybrid type ability in that you can get that horizontal and vertical mobility, which just feels so good. I'll show some of the footage here now of me just exploring the practice range by combining his Rocket Punch and Seismic Slam, and while a lot of these are techniques you could have done previously with the use of Uppercut as well, it just feels so much more fluid to only have to use 2 abilities for these sorts of rollouts, and overall just the mobility of him as a hero feels a lot better. Now, for those of you out there who are super into Doomfist rollouts and know all the super cool techs, maybe this will end up feeling a bit different. I do know, based on some of the discussions other people in the alpha were having, that a lot of the nitty-gritty mechanics of performing different techs have changed significantly. The only one I personally noticed is the little Rocket Punch jump tech you can do to just get a bit of extra horizontal distance. That changed in such a way where you can still perform it, but the timing of when you have to execute the jump relative to punching with your fist has been changed. So basically that, at the very least, is going to boil down to just relearning the timing, which, oh boy, always love resetting my muscle memory. Regardless though, it does seem like there's still a lot of cool and fun mobility things you can do with him, but enough about the techie stuff. How does he feel as a tank hero? Well, he honestly feels pretty good. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of playing Wrecking Ball, which is definitely a good thing since Wrecking Ball is my favorite hero, but there are a few areas where he doesn't feel quite as satisfying as he used to, particularly in terms of the damage output he can deal. While he may still be able to punch people really hard, knock them into walls, and sustain taking even more damage now that his base health pool has been increased, the fact that you just can't really one-shot people into walls anymore, I don't know, just makes him feel a bit off. Even though he's fun to move around and do stuff with as a tank, it ultimately conveys this feeling of not actually doing anything. Sure, you can dislocate the enemy, knock them into a pit even if they happen to be in the right position, but the fact that you just aren't really getting kills with him anymore just makes him feel weird. And I'm sure this more than anything just has to do with the fact that he used to be a damage-dealing damage hero, and now has to be a more crowd control, less damage-dealing tank hero, but that aspect of the transition doesn't really feel great, at least not at first. Aside from this though, he really hasn't actually changed that much despite becoming a tank hero. I think it honestly sort of boils down to just him feeling more fluid and how he can move around the battlefield, having a bit more defensive and crowd control elements worked into his kit, and just not being able to kill as easily. He's definitely a hero that I would have liked to have gotten to spend more time playing around with during the alpha, so I'm very excited to get back into playing him once the beta starts, because I'm honestly kind of surprised how well this tank rework for him actually seems to have worked out. It wasn't nearly as substantial or significant as Orisa's rework, but I think it works well, and it's definitely an exciting direction to take him. The next hero I'd like to talk about, though, is Bastion. Now, as much as I've been praising the Orisa and Doomfist reworks, I think Bastion's rework is the one out of these four I'm going to talk about today that I'm the most non-conflicted about in terms of me thinking it is amazing. This just feels like an objectively better version of Bastion. So once again, a real quick summary of what actually changed with him. His primary fire has mostly remained the same, except that it has a slightly slower fire rate and also is a bit more effective at longer ranges. He lost his self-heal ability and instead got a sticky grenade, which bounces off walls and then sticks to the floor and enemy targets. His turret mode is now on a cooldown, but he has tank tracks while using it, which lets him drive around and not be completely stationary, and his ultimate artillery mode replaces the old tank mode and lets him sit in a spot and essentially fire 3 meteor strikes into the air to have come crashing down on 3 different locations. Now, I know there's been a lot of debate from people on whether or not this is a good direction to take Bastion, and admittedly I was skeptical of it at first as well, but it was almost immediate, I think, after I actually started playing this new version that I realized this is the right direction to take him as a hero. I'm not sure that it's the direction everyone's gonna enjoy him being taken in, but I think it is the right one and the best one for him as a hero. And specifically, which really stuck out to me almost immediately upon playing this new version, is that it feels like he's been reworked to work better in Deathmatch. Now, let me explain. Personally, I'm a big fan of Overwatch Deathmatch. I know a lot of people don't like that mode for whatever reason, but it is by far my go-to arcade mode, and one of the heroes I actually play quite a bit in Deathmatch is Bastion. And so as soon as I started playing the new Overwatch 2 reworked Bastion, I pretty quickly realized that every single little change that had happened as a part of his kit almost seemed as if it was done in order to make him better in the Deathmatch environment. He's less reliant on teammates. He's more mobile in getting around and being able to take care of himself. He admittedly lost his self-heal ability, which is kind of a downside in that regard, but honestly, I think that was a necessary change for them to make, simply to compensate for the fact that he's fairly independent as a hero at this point. Previously, Bastion was always super dependent on his teammates in order to really get any utility, whether that means having a Reinhardt shield to protect him from the enemy, or a Mercy tacked onto him with her healing and damage beam. He always felt like a hero that was fun, but was almost entirely dependent on your team being able to make use of him. And sure, there are people who are able to solo Bastion just fine, but generally, if you wanted him to be effective as a DPS hero on your team, you kind of had to have your team working well together to make that work. Now, he feels more in line with other damage heroes where he can just sort of do his thing and be effective without having to rely on a specific comp or strategy that your teammates are helping you out with. Now, overall, I think this is probably a perfect example to validate what many people have said previously about Overwatch 2, which is that it overall has a more deathmatchy feel to it. And out of my experience playing in the Overwatch 2 alpha, playing as Bastion was absolutely the biggest indicator that, yeah, this is sort of the direction it feels like Overwatch 2 is going. I'll probably talk more about it in one of my later videos where I focus more on the 5v5 changes and other aspects of the game in that regard. But for now, Bastion I think fits very well in the Overwatch 2 environment. I think the rework has done a great job of making him work as a hero and not be just utterly dependent on his teammates. And on top of that, he's really fun. His new tactical grenade ability in particular, I actually really enjoy. I was skeptical about it at first, but it's it's really useful, not only in terms of being able to deal damage to enemies, but also in terms of mobility. Much like other heroes who can take self-damage from explosive type weapons and abilities, Bastion can use his grenade to get some pretty significant air to get up onto high ground or into other tricky positions where he might end up having an advantage over the enemy team. This is just a really cool mechanic to give him because, at first glance, it's like, oh, just another thrown explosive weapon. But for him specifically, it has a lot more utility than just as a grenade to be used on the enemy. I will note that I think the visual design of this tactical grenade could use some work. As it was in the alpha, it basically just looked like a distorted Moira healing orb, and just the visual and sound design of the weapon itself didn't feel great. I'm assuming it's something that Blizzard is still working on, and they're probably going to refine it and make it more, better as they continue through Overwatch 2's development, but I did think it was worth pointing out. His new assault mode, which is just the sentry turret on tank tracks, feels great. Honestly, I never felt like the duration of the ability was an issue. It's usually something that I found was best used to sort of quickly pop into assault mode when it's like, oh, there's a window to deal a bunch of damage. Maybe your Reinhardt earth-shattered the enemy, or they're all stuck in a graviton surge or something. So in a lot of ways, it feels like a nice progression of his original sentry mode, because just having that extra mobility just works for him. But the last big element to talk about with Bastion is, of course, his brand new artillery mode, which is so much fun. My favorite aspect of this ultimate, I think, has to be the mind games you can play with the enemy team while using it, because a loud noise goes off whenever you activate it, so the enemy knows what's coming. But it's just so much fun seeing how the enemy team reacts and trying to get really clever with where you actually have the shells fall down, so that you can try to, put it somewhere they're not going to be expecting, so maybe they'll fall back into an area where they think they're going to be more protected, but then, oh no, 3 shells come right down on top of them. Or putting it somewhere sort of preemptively and then placing the other 2 in this different spot so that they think, oh, I gotta run away from this area, and then they just end up running directly into the other 2 shells coming down. Oh, there's so many fun things you can do with it. It's great. So yeah, I guess in short, Bastion feels really good. I think he's unanimously probably my favorite of the reworks. I just think every element of it works so well for him as a hero. And I honestly don't think I have any complaints about it other than the visuals of his new tactical grenade ability. And that then brings us to Sombra. Oh boy, Sombra. So as some of you know, I don't really play Sombra at all in general. Like, she's one of my least played heroes probably, and because of that, I was really putting off playing her in the alpha. I think I didn't actually play her at all until either the last day or the last 2 days that I actually had access to the alpha, because I just didn't want to have to, try messing around with this hero that I'm not really good with, and then I'd end up throwing, and I didn't want to be that sort of drag on my teammates. But I figured, I gotta try her out. She's got the new rework and everything, give it a go and see how it is. And oh my goodness, I was beyond pleasantly surprised. Real quick to summarize the changes, her hack no longer fully cancels enemy abilities, it just cancels them for the first second of the hack taking place, and then after that just reveals the hack target's location to your team, as well as allowing you to deal extra damage to them with your machine pistol. Stealth is no longer interrupted by performing hack, which means you can hack while invisible, which is probably the best part of this entire new reworked kit, and her EMP now deals 40% of an enemy target's current HP as damage, along with a whole host of other little number changes and tweaks across the board. So, why did I enjoy playing Sombra in the Overwatch 2 alpha so much? Well, interestingly enough, the reason I enjoyed her so much was because this new version of Sombra reminds me of the Spy from TF2, which, might seem obvious because there's a lot of similarities between these two characters. If you're familiar, the Spy from TF2 can go invisible, as well as disguise himself as enemy team members, and then perform backstabs, which are basically an instant kill on any target. For whatever reason, I don't know why exactly it felt this way, but Sombra in the Overwatch 2 alpha reminded me of playing Spy in TF2 far more than she ever has in any version she had in Overwatch 1. I think the reason for this is that in Overwatch 2, Sombra feels like she's more of an assassin as opposed to a disruptor. In Overwatch 1, she feels much more like a character who should be focusing on hacking key targets to prevent them from using their abilities, and just in general causing disruption within the enemy team. However, in Overwatch 2, it felt like she was much more effective as an assassin, particularly when it comes to getting behind enemy lines, locating an isolated target, hacking them while stealthed, and then opening fire before they have time to respond, and due to the extra damage you deal to hack targets with your machine pistol, usually being able to pretty consistently take out that target. I found myself using her with this sort of isolate and eliminate type playstyle, which was really fun and felt very unique from how I feel Sombra is typically played in Overwatch 1. She seemed particularly good on bigger maps as well, such as the brand new push maps, since there's a whole ton of different side passages and alleyways and stuff that you can pretty easily just sort of slip into, and then people, even if they notice you're there, you get off a hack, but then maybe, another teammate noticed you, so you don't want to come out of stealth to start shooting, you can just disappear, and the enemy might take a couple seconds to sort of shoot around and try to find you, but then ultimately give up because you're gone. It was honestly a really satisfying playstyle, and I could honestly see myself playing her a lot more with this new Overwatch 2 rework. Now, I guess I should also mention that she isn't nearly as good at the disruption game as she used to be in Overwatch 1, of course, and particularly I noticed this personally when I was playing a Wrecking Ball and the enemy team would have a Sombra and she'd hack me and oh no, I don't have ball for a second, and then I just go back into ball form and keep swinging around. I feel like a lot of people would look at Sombra and think that she's weaker because she can't do this sort of targeted ability denial, but honestly, in terms of playing her as a hero, I think it's more than made up for with how enjoyable it is to just play her as an assassin. Now, I will mention that she might have been a bit overtuned in the alpha. I know this is something that pro players commented on when they got to play the Overwatch 2 reworks a number of months ago, and the only reason I'm really saying it now is because, as I said, I never play her in Overwatch 1, I should be garbage at her, and yet I felt like I was still doing decently with her in the alpha. Maybe it just happened to be the case that I was in matches up against people who just weren't that great, and thus I was able to, do something, but she maybe did feel a little too good. It's kind of like the Brigitte situation back when she first released, where you play her and it feels like you're doing great, you're getting all these kills, you're healing all your teammates and everything, and then at some point you're like, I probably shouldn't be doing as well as I am on this hero. I kind of got that a little bit with Sombra in the Overwatch 2 alpha, but I don't know, that's probably something that'll just take more time, and once the beta comes out, I can get to play her again. I'm certainly interested in seeing how she feels in that scenario. But that does it for my incredibly lengthy discussion about the Overwatch 2 hero reworks. I honestly didn't intend for this video to be as long as it was, but I wanted it to just be a sort of casual talk where I share my personal thoughts on these heroes and my personal experiences both playing as and against them in-game. And I guess it went on longer than I expected. Oh well, it happens. But on that note, I would love to hear your thoughts on all this in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on any of the reworked heroes, as well as the new hero Sojourn, based on the various gameplay videos you've gotten to see of them so far? Or if you're maybe watching this after the beta has already started and you got a chance to play them for yourself, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Either way though, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit up that bell icon, and come join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any of my future Overwatch content. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make these videos possible, and if you'd like to join them to earn some cool rewards, then just hit that join button down below. Otherwise, this is Master EN Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.